Hi everyone, welcome to the latest Team Evil GSP on IGTV video. Today I would like to continue the book/author review. And today we are focusing in on a book series by an author who, quite honestly, I actually know, which is really unique. Those of you that are familiar with the Sports Performance Radio might remember that I did an interview with the author of this wonderful tome, Mr. Randy Roach. So, in accompaniment with this video, you might want to go find that video or that audio file and give it a listen. Randy is, as I'm about to explain, an extraordinary historian of, as he would refer to it, physical culture, which is actually what bodybuilding lifestyle was called before it was called the bodybuilding lifestyle. And honestly, that acumen that Randy brings is really captured in this first of 3 editions. I'll cover them in a second, the other 2 rather. But this very first edition, Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors, Volume 1, I happen to have the really lovely and signed hardback editions that maybe you guys won't be able to find at this point in time, but nonetheless, still worth owning, still worth reading. This volume basically covers bodybuilding up to the kind of modern era, or the golden era, as you might think of it. It covers bodybuilding up to pretty much the inception of organized bodybuilding. So essentially all of the prehistory, all the names, all the movers, how the leaders got to where they were, all of that interesting stuff that has kind of been lost to history. Yes, it is a pretty significant tome. No, it's not, something you're just going to read in a day. I actually don't know how many pages this first volume is. Shade over 500. So it's a book. It is really and truly a piece of historical literature. Not to blow smoke up Randy's ass, but that's what it is. It's not just your garden variety, subway, read on the subway book about bodybuilding. It's literally a book about history that happens to involve bodybuilding or what is to become bodybuilding. So I can't recommend that enough. And then after that, you find and you can see Arnold on the cover, and you might be able to see in the video the kind of superimposed background image of Arthur Jones, a name you'll probably hear out of me rather a lot. But anyway, Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors, Volume 2. And this particular book covers bodybuilding essentially up to the pumping iron era, up to and including Arnold's reign, if you will. I think through reading this, it rightly emphasizes kind of more the other stuff that was going on in the background. How the NPC prevailed over the AAU, how the United States federal government had a play in that by changing some laws, the pending illegality of steroids in sports, and of course the monumental and strangely ignored and understated in modern times, the influence of Arthur Jones. His money, his mind, his influence on training methodology, training equipment, and the underlying industry that is modern bodybuilding. Arthur Jones was essentially the very first guru and personal trainer, and no one gives him credit for that. Arthur Jones essentially created what we now think of as internet training or remote training. Arthur Jones was doing that by mail in the early 70s. So an awful lot of what people take for granted today is outlined in how it came to be in this also 500-plus page. This one, I believe, is actually a little larger. This is a 600-page tome. Really, really good. Really, really interesting, entertaining. And I would say, and I'm about to hold up Volume 3, but I would say if there's any one you should probably read, and absorb, it's this one. But for the sake of argument, I would start with the first one, get the historical context. But if you really want to know about that classic era and all that silly shit that people want to believe, about how, early bodybuilders knew they didn't use drugs, and that if they did, it was this and that, and, how they trained and what they thought, it's actually all chronicled right here, folks. And by and large, the story probably isn't the story this book tells. So I would really, really suggest that if you're a fraction as serious as you might think you are, that you own, read, and reread this particular tome. Okay, Randy did an amazing job collecting this information, filtering the information to keep the absolutely necessary themes to the story without just egregiously or unnecessarily throwing people under the bus, which is kind of really easy to do in a business and an industry that's as fringe and rife with just problems. Bodybuilding historically has been a place for drug use, sexual deviance, lying and cheating on the organizational level, all of that stuff. So it's very, very challenging to write a legitimate chronicle without blatantly just going, this guy did this. And Randy did a really, really good job of encapsulating and capturing the theme of what was going on without really egregiously throwing anyone under the bus. But if you read and reread and think, there's an awful lot of hints as to who was doing what and at least what Randy thought their motivations were. And I tend to agree with pretty much all of it. So I just can't recommend this enough. I really can't. And then the most recent and not surprisingly titled Volume 3 in the series is essentially just the Arnold and Franco comeback of 1981. It's a small run-up to that, essentially from Pumping Iron through 1981. In my mind, probably the least interesting of the series, not because it's a lesser book, not because it's lesser well done or anything of that nature. I just happen to think the events of that time period were considerably less interesting. After Pumping Iron, we moved into that kind of weird Frank Zane era where, quite frankly, bodybuilders got smaller and worse, in my opinion. And I think you'll kind of find that Randy sort of echoes that. The champion, the Mr. Olympia, you went from 235 pounds to 180 pounds, and that doesn't sound like a step forward. And I think that the return of Arnold circa the 1980 Mr. Olympia was in retrospectively kind of viewed more as a righting of the ship than some step backward. I think at the time people really thought it was some step backward to an earlier time, and I think when you view it in the lens that Randy presents, it's actually kind of just a righting of the ship and getting things back on track for the coming future. But again, incredibly good book. It is definitely a lesser tome, but also keep in mind that this is encompassing essentially 4 or 5 years in total, really just focusing on 2, whereas the other books are multi-decade concepts. So, but anyway, as a series, those 3 books, Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors by Randy Roach, they're available, the standard outlets, Amazon.com, etc. I believe Randy has a web page specifically dedicated to that. Just type in Muscle, Smoke, and Mirrors into Google or any other search engine, if there are any other search engines anymore, and you'll get that information. But again, from me, from Team Evil GSP, this book gets its absolute highest. This book series gets the absolute highest recommendation. You cannot go wrong. I guarantee you, no matter what you know about the sport, no matter how involved and cognizant you are, there's information in there you didn't know. I don't think many people listening to this are a bigger historian of the sport than I, and literally every other page I was like, really? I didn't know. So it's a really, really good resource. It's really, really good background information, and I think that it's something literally everyone who has a gym membership or lifts weights should, before you go out and buy the dipshit Under Armour t-shirt, you should spend the $30 on one of these books and get started. And by the way, and absolutely not to kind of self market, but whether you do or don't read these books, definitely jump on the SPR Sports Performance Radio and listen to me interview Randy Roach. Again, there's a free resource. You don't even have to buy the book, although you still should. But if you want to start with just getting a feel for the guy and just the width and birth of his knowledge and acumen, little side note that really has nothing to do with nothing. But Randy is medically blind. He's a blind man, and I mention that throughout the interview, or actually in the pre and post introduction to the interview, because it means that the information he's rattling off, rapid fire, in depth, is coming to him from memory. It's not notes. It's not, he's not reading it off a screen. The width and birth of what he has just from recall is fucking staggering. Absolutely staggering. So I really, really, like I said, I don't want to gush, but I can't recommend these enough. And I think every one of you should grab them, read them, share them, suggest other people read them. So anyway, with that, I shall speak to you in a couple days a week. Thanks for tuning in.